And Tedra Cobb joins us now. Welcome. It's nice to see you.
Thank you.
For those who may just be starting to pay attention to the race now, 2 years ago you challenged Congresswoman Elise Stefanik in New York 21, and you're running again this fall. A lot has changed in our world, obviously, since the race 2 years ago, and we'll get into that in just a moment. But why don't we start with a reintroduction? Tell us who you are, how you got into politics, a little bit about your life and your career.
Sure. So I moved here over 35 years ago. I went to SUNY Potsdam, graduated from SUNY Potsdam, married my husband Scott, and together we raised our 2 children in Canton. I started my career in the New York State prison system. I worked for Riverview Correctional Facility and left that and did HIV and AIDS work. And I always say for over 30 years I've done healthcare work in the community. I've been an educator, a healthcare advocate, a firefighter. So my background is varied, but I would say the thread for me is the public service. I've been a dedicated public servant for, again, over 30 years.
Your start in politics, the St. Lawrence County Legislature.
That's right. I ran in 2002 and won, and then I served for 2 terms, 8 years. And the first time, of course, I was challenging the incumbent, but I ran unopposed the second term, which to me in local government always means that you've really been a good public servant.
So you ran in 2018. You got 40% of the vote. What did you take away from the race 2 years ago? What did you learn? What were the lessons you took away?
Well, it's always important to run again. Sometimes people don't run again, but I think we've been able to build on the experience and on the momentum. And if I could just remind people why I'm in this race. In 2010, when I was done in the legislature, in the St. Lawrence County Legislature, I never thought I would run again. A career in politics was not what I wanted or envisioned for myself. But fast forward to 2015, my daughter Ada lost the ability to walk and to stand, and she needed emergency back surgery. And as you can imagine, it was terrifying, but we were lucky because I had insurance through my job. So Ada got the surgery that she needed. A month later, I lost my job, and we lost our insurance. So in 2017, when Elise Stefanik voted to repeal the Affordable Care Act and to kick 64,000 people off their insurance, their health care, and to strip away protections for people with pre-existing conditions, people like my own daughter Ada, that was it. I knew I had to run, and that's why I'm here today with you.
Healthcare was a top priority, and now we know why for you in the 2018 race. Is it still in 2020?
It is the top priority and the thing that weighs on people's minds in this district. Since April, we've made almost 2.5 million calls to people. So of course for us, and my background in healthcare is to put people first and to put public health first with coronavirus. So we've had these conversations. Healthcare is the #1 issue on people's minds, fears of losing their health care, access to health care. And I want to remind you that the vote to repeal the Affordable Care Act not only kicked 64,000 people off their health care, but it would have closed rural hospitals and nursing homes. The New York State Hospital Association of New York State, Haney's, begged Elise Stefanik and other Republicans not to repeal the Affordable Care Act. And they said, if you do this, it will close our hospitals, it will close our nursing homes. And yet Elise Stefanik sided with the insurance companies and she voted to repeal the Affordable Care Act. She's done it, she's voted 5 times to do that, despite the Hospital Association of New York State saying don't do that. What coronavirus has shown us is that this healthcare system is very fragile, and that access to healthcare is fragile, and that Elise Stefanik has made it worse.
The Congresswoman has criticized you, saying that 2 years ago you supported Medicare for all, but that this time around your position has changed. Has it changed?
I have always, for 30 years, worked on expanding access to healthcare. That has been my life's work. I think that the best path forward is a Medicare public option, which basically is this. If people want, they have a choice and they can buy into Medicare. If they want to keep the insurance that they have, they're able to do so.
The more progressive wing of your party, the Bernie Sanders, the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortezes, and others, fully back Medicare for all. What changed your mind on this?
I think it's the work that I've done. I do a lot of research, and it's understanding healthcare on the delivery side. Remember, I served on the Northern New York Healthcare Redesign Commission. I served with Betty Little, I served with Patty Ritchie, I served with other health professionals here. So the work that I've done and my understanding leads me to the Medicare public option.
Along with healthcare, what are some of the other big issues this time around for you?
Well, Social Security and Medicare are the things that we're hearing from voters. So again, we've made those phone calls to voters, we're having those conversations. And in this district, 1 in 4 people relies on Social Security for their livelihood. Just yesterday, I was talking to someone in Watertown, and she said, I rely on Social Security. And without it, I would have no income. So I just think it's important to remind people that Elise Stefanik in 2012 wrote the plan to privatize Social Security and to end Medicare as we know it by turning it into a voucher program. And in 2014, when asked about raising the age of Social Security, what would you do? She ran off the stage. So Elise Stefanik has voted to cut hundreds of billions of dollars from Social Security and Medicare. It's weighing on people's minds every day in this district. Those are huge issues. And of course, in this district, where we rely on clean air and clean water for our tourism economy, for farming, obviously the environment is crucially important, and supporting the environment and addressing climate change. Of course, this summer we're seeing fires, we're seeing hurricanes. We have got to really have people who are elected who are going to fight to fully fund the EPA, who are going to end subsidies for fossil fuels. I will do that. And Elise Stefanik has, she voted against the Clean Power Plan. She sided with corporations who want to dump or who have dumped toxic waste into our waters.
So when it comes to climate change, do you support the Green New Deal?
I don't support the Green New Deal, but I do support, again, fully funding the EPA. And I think one of the things for me is to think about science, that science should be leading us in every decision, science-based decision making. So we have the Scientific Integrity Act that should be passed that would allow scientists to do what they do best and to inform us elected officials so that there's a separation between politics and the scientists.
With the Green New Deal, is it the cost, the trillions? Is it the zero emissions by 2050? Is it the expansion of public transportation and electric cars? Is it too much, too soon?
I think the Green New Deal is a sort of a roadmap or a plan, but I like specifics. So again, fully funding the EPA, ending subsidies for fossil fuels, the Scientific Integrity Act.
The big thing that's changed since the race in 2018, of course, is the coronavirus. Is that at the top of the list, do you think, for many voters in 2020?
I think the impact of the coronavirus is, whether it's healthcare and access to healthcare, whether it's the economy, how will we get jobs back, opening up the border with Canada to get our economy flowing again, right? And we still, after all of these months, don't have a realistic or consistent federal response to this pandemic. I mean, we've just learned that the president was purposefully underplaying the dangers of this virus. And he's done it even this week in a town hall, and Elise Stefanik will not hold him accountable for that. It is unconscionable that you would put politics before people's lives. Here we are this week, 200,000 people will have passed away, will have lost their lives. That's 200,000 people with families, with children, with parents, with best friends. And yet this president still has underplayed the depths of the despair that people are facing with this virus, and the millions of people who have lost their jobs and their health care, and the economy in shambles. We are in chaos right now, and this president seems to neglect it.
And we'll talk a little bit about the impact on the economy here in the North Country, but did the president, the administration, Congress do enough to address this crisis early enough when it comes to helping states with PPE, when it comes to ventilators and providing necessary equipment that was needed? Was the response early on adequate enough, or did that add to the problem?
It absolutely added to the problem. And again, we know that the president purposefully did that. He said it. So he said, I had to underplay, I'm going to underplay this. He put politics first. We still don't have the testing that we need in the country. We still don't have the PPE that we need in the schools. We still don't have a consistent and federal response to this pandemic and a clear way forward.
Congress did pass a couple of stimulus packages, $1,200 checks for everyone, but should there be more? When you mention the schools and the cost to the schools for PPE and cleaning supplies and sanitizing the schools, the states and counties and the economic impact that they're feeling, the loss of revenue, should Congress do more? Should it pass another stimulus package?
Absolutely they should. I mean, right now, the Senate, I mean, this is where we become frustrated because the Senate has not been able to come to an agreement to pass something meaningful to really help us. And, you know, the president has been very clear that he doesn't care about New York State. We need representatives in Congress. Unfortunately, Elise Stefanik is often antagonizing or in an antagonistic relationship with other leaders who are not Republicans. And we need somebody who is going to work with our local representatives and work with our state representatives, including our representatives in Albany and the governor, to make sure that we have what we need to open up our economy, to get our small businesses back going, to make sure our schools stay open.
How severe has the impact been here in the North Country? The loss of jobs, businesses closing down. You mentioned the border being shut down now since March to all but essential travel. What has been the impact on the North Country?
Well, we're seeing it in hospitals. We're seeing that hospitals are laying people off. We're seeing the small businesses are struggling to reopen. Our healthcare providers, are struggling because people are not accessing healthcare. And also daycare centers, right? Our daycare centers closed, they're struggling to reopen. Mm-hmm. You know, the tentacles of this virus have reached in every level of our economy. And so we have got, again, to have a consistent, realistic federal response to help our economy open back up.
Schools have reopened. Some schools are doing all remote learning, especially in Elizabethtown, New York, where really the largest outbreak here in the North Country has been in Elizabethtown at the Essex Center nursing home. 11 deaths, more than 100 positive cases. In the case of kids having to learn at home remotely, does it call attention to another big issue here in the North Country, and that's rural broadband? Those kids needing to have broadband to learn at home, and are we once again seeing that a number of kids not only don't have access to broadband, but in some cases it may be affordability, and they're just not able to get the internet that they need to learn at home?
It's about access, it's about affordability, and it's about adaptation and understanding, right? That's what broadband is all about, or that infrastructure. So when I left the legislature in 2010, we were told, and I'm going to put this in quotes, the last mile is going to be built. That was 2010. Elise Stefanik has been in Congress for 6 years, and we have still not seen the last mile be built. And we're seeing with coronavirus the real impacts of that. We know that because we don't have the infrastructure, it makes our economy struggles, our small businesses struggle, our entrepreneurs struggle. Now we're seeing it with schools, and we're also seeing it with medicine. I'll give you an example. I have a brother who has lupus. Every 6 months, I drive him to a specialist in Rochester. Now, physically, that's hard for him. Time-wise, that's hard for us. For the first time, he was able to have a telemedicine interview. He was lucky because he had pretty good broadband at his house. What about all of us who don't? So again, the North Country is left behind when we don't have the infrastructure. Elise Stefanik has been in Congress for 6 years. And that last mile has still not been built out. Where is the advocacy that we need? Where is the person fighting for us?
Dank just last week announced a $200,000 grant for Tupper Lake to bring 5 miles of fiber. Is that what it's going to take, little bits and pieces like that? Or should there be a larger effort to try to do it in more leaps and bounds and not necessarily a few miles here, a few miles there?
There must be leaps and bounds. There has to be leaps and bounds. We are farther and farther behind. And remember, the North Country has always taken a little bit longer to recover from economic crises. And it's not, think about it in terms of fairness. It's not fair for us to be left behind time and time again. We need an advocate. We need a fierce fighter who will stand up and who will make sure that our voice is heard, and that we, not just during election season. Elise Stefanik shows up, for a photo op, but where is she the rest of the time?
How has COVID changed the race? How much of an impact is COVID having on your ability to campaign?
It's changed how we campaign. So for me, it's always about public health. We've talked about healthcare in my background, and it's about putting people first and public health first. So in April, we started phone banking. We started reaching out to voters, and we've made about 2.5 million calls. And by the time this airs, it'll be more than that. So we've been listening to voters, talking with voters, and we have sent out 10,000 handwritten postcards, 300,000 texts. So it's different not being physically in the same space, but again, it's about putting people first, it's about listening to voters, and we've been able to do that because of the infrastructure that we have. We have 16 full-time staff, we've had over 100 interns, 31 full-time fellows, and those are younger people. And then we have over 2,000 volunteers who get on those phones and reach out to friends and neighbors. So sure, the style of the campaign has changed, but the commitment to listening to voters, the commitment to making sure that I know what's first and foremost on their minds so that I'm representing them when we win in November.
This time around, you have a lot more campaign cash. And ironically, that may be due thanks to Elise Stefanik becoming a rising star in the Republican Party when she was such a big part of the impeachment proceedings last fall. That got her a lot of national attention. It also got you attention and brought you donors. Has that, having millions more for this race at this time around, has that helped you dramatically? Have you been able to get on the air and online with ads sooner and more, and will that boost your campaign in the long run?
So we have raised money. We've been able to raise money so that we can communicate with voters, as you've talked about with TV and digital. I think it's really important to think about Elise Stefanik and the veneer that she has of being bipartisan, and what we're now seeing is that Elise Stefanik is beholden to this president. She won't stand up to this president. And we know that Russia has put bounties on the lives of American troops, and she said nothing, and the president has said nothing. When the president has called fallen soldiers, fallen heroes, losers and suckers, she says nothing. When we learned that this president has underplayed, has purposefully denied the gravity of coronavirus, she says nothing. That's what we now know from Elise Stefanik and her antics from November to now, that she will go to Iowa, to Tulsa. She has time to go to DC, but she doesn't have time for us here every day and fighting for us.
On the Russian bounties on the heads of U.S. soldiers, there is some question, though, about whether or not the intelligence is true. Is it, in fact, verified? And just again this week, that question was raised.
So for 81 days, or over that now, over 80 days, we've had silence. We should be investigating who knew what, when they knew it. Our soldiers in this district, Fort Drum, have been deployed to Afghanistan, and Elise Stefanik sits on the House Intelligence Committee. She sits on the Armed Services Committee, and during this whole episode, we've learned that she was missing from her job for months. As a representative, she should be first and foremost saying, who knew what, when did they know it? I'm gonna have the backs of those soldiers. I'm gonna make sure that they're protected. She owes it to them, she owes it to their families and their children, but instead, silence.
You talk about the president. Do you think there are some Republicans and perhaps more moderates and independents in the 21st district that will not vote for President Trump? Do you think you're going to win over voters you didn't have in 2018?
Absolutely, but I also think it's important to remember Obama and Biden won this district. We have wonderful leaders that are Republicans who have endorsed me. Teresa Sayward, Assemblywoman Teresa Sayward, and Janet Dupre have just come out and endorsed me. And that is because of my record of working with people in this community for a long time and alongside people in the Republican Party. And I think people are very frustrated with this divisiveness in Washington.
2 years ago, you had a Green Party candidate in the race. In fact, for the last several election cycles, there has been a Green Party candidate in the New York 21 race. Not the case in 2020. Lynn Kahn didn't pull in a big percentage of the vote, but does that help your campaign not to have that third party candidate?
Yes, it does. And I think to speak to that, and you asked me about the environment, I think because of my own personal commitment and the work that I've done with regard to the environment and my commitment, I think that's why we don't have a Green Party candidate. I think we have a great coalition.
Size up the race right now. How do you feel with about a month to go? A number of the analysts still think this leans Republican, this race, but do you think you can prove them wrong?
Well, Rachel Bykofer, one of the race raters, rated the race a toss-up. And she did that because of what we were just talking about, the independence of this district. She looked at the district and she said, look at all the people who are of no party affiliation. Look at how people split the ticket, right? They vote for a Democrat and a Republican on the same ticket. So imagine this. Trump won, and you're right, with 53. On the same ballot, Schumer had over 60%. That's a Trump-Schumer voter. In what district do we find that person? In this district. So I feel that we've got the momentum, we've got the message. We are going to head into the election with strength, with clarity. And again, I want to say, and I've said this several times, with integrity and grit. We have run a clean campaign. We will never lie. I will never lie. Unlike my opponent, who will name call and lie and bring the worst of Washington into this district every 2 years when she campaigns. That's not who we are. That's not who I am.